Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon watching the stars through the main window. The year was 2387 and humans had built homes on 17 different star systems under the Terran Colonial Federation. Jake had been exploring space for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like what his science officer Lisa Barnes was showing him on her screen. Lisa pointed at the strange readings coming from her instruments. The energy signals were coming from a dead system, called Kepler 442, where nothing should exist except cold rocks and empty space. The readings showed something big was there, and it was giving off power in ways that made no sense according to everything humans knew about science. Jake ordered his crew to set course for the strange signals. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez worked at his station making sure the ship's engines were ready for whatever they might find. Communications Officer Kate Wilson kept trying to contact Earth, but the signals were too weak at this distance from human space. When the Horizon reached the Kepler 442 system, Jake could not believe what he saw through the main window. A huge crystal structure was floating in space near the system's neutron star. The crystal was as big as a moon, and it glowed with soft blue light. The surface was covered with symbols and markings that looked like writing, but Kate's universal translator could not read any of it. Lisa ran scan after scan on the crystal structure. Her readings showed that it was made from materials that should not exist, and it was older than anything humans had ever found. The crystal was sending out quantum waves that created ripples in space itself. Danny said the technology was impossible, according to human science, but there it was floating right in front of them. Jake made the decision to move closer to the crystal. As the Horizon approached the strange structure, something amazing happened. The symbols on the crystal's surface began to glow brighter, and suddenly holographic images appeared in the space around the ship. The images showed star maps and diagrams of technology that looked far beyond anything humans had built. Danny managed to connect the ship's computers to the crystal structure, and immediately data began flowing into their systems. The information was vast and seemed to contain the knowledge of an entire civilization. Lisa worked frantically to translate and understand what they were seeing. The data showed historical records that went back millions of years and mentioned a species called the Architects. The most shocking discovery came when Lisa found star charts that specifically marked Earth's solar system. The charts showed detailed surveys of Earth that were created 65 million years ago, long before humans had evolved. The surveys included information about Earth's geology, its weather patterns, and even predictions about how life would develop on the planet. Kate discovered references to something called the Terra Protocol buried deep in the alien data. The protocol seemed to be a set of instructions or rules about Earth, but the language was too complex for their computers to fully translate. What they could understand suggested that Earth had been under observation by alien species for far longer than humans had existed. As more data flowed from the crystal archive, Jake realized they had found something that would change everything. Humans thought they knew about their place in the universe. The archives contained blueprints for technologies that could revolutionize human civilization and historical records that showed Earth was not as isolated as humans had believed. Lisa made another disturbing discovery when she found that every major event in Earth's history was recorded in the alien archives. The extinction of the dinosaurs, ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and other disasters were all documented with precise dates and detailed analysis. It was as if someone had been watching Earth and taking notes for millions of years. Danny noticed that the crystal structure was not just sending them information, but was also scanning their ship and crew. The alien technology was downloading human DNA patterns, studying their technology, and even analyzing their cultural data. The crystal seemed to be learning about humans just as much as it was teaching them about the universe. The archive began transmitting the human data it had collected to unknown recipients somewhere in deep space. Kate tried to block the transmissions, but the alien technology was too advanced for human systems to stop. Jake realized that by finding the crystal archive, they had announced humanity's presence to whoever had built it. As Jake watched more holographic displays appear around his ship. He understood that they had uncovered secrets that some alien species had been keeping for millions of years. The Crystal Archive was not just a library of ancient knowledge, but a monitoring station that had been watching Earth and waiting for humans to develop enough technology to find it. The crew of the Horizon had made the greatest discovery in human history, but Jake had a growing feeling that this knowledge would come with a terrible price. The alien archive suggested that humanity was part of some vast plan that had been in motion since before humans had learned to make fire. Now that they had found the truth about Earth's hidden watchers, Jake wondered if humanity was ready for what would come next. Dr. Amy Carter received Captain Morrison's transmission at her research facility on Earth 3 days after the Horizon discovered the Crystal Archive. Amy was one of the best archaeologists in human space, and she immediately understood that the alien data would change everything humans believed about their history. She called her research partner Dr. Ben Clark, and together they began studying the information that Morrison had sent back to Earth. Amy and Ben worked day and night comparing the alien star charts with Earth's geological records. What they found made Amy's hands shake as she read the data. Every major extinction event in Earth's history matched exactly with specific entries in the alien archives. The death of the dinosaurs, the great dying that killed most life on Earth, and dozens of smaller disasters were all recorded in the alien database with precise timing and detailed analysis. The archives revealed that Earth had been designated as something called a genetic laboratory by the species known as the Architects. Ben discovered that the Architects had been conducting experiments on thousands of worlds across the galaxy for millions of years. They had been guiding the evolution of life forms according to some grand design that humans could not yet understand. Earth was described in the archives as their masterpiece, carefully shaped over countless ages to produce humanity. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison and his crew aboard the Horizon continued to study the Crystal Archive. The structure was far more than just a passive storage device. Lisa Barnes reported that the Crystal was actively scanning their ship and downloading everything about human technology and culture. The alien intelligence seemed to be learning about humanity just as fast as humans were learning about the Architects. Danny Rodriguez made a troubling discovery when he found that the Crystal Archive was transmitting all the human data it had collected to receivers across the galaxy. The transmissions were using quantum communication methods that allowed instant contact across vast distances. Kate Wilson tried to block the signals, but the alien technology was too advanced for human systems to interfere with. Amy made the most shocking discovery when she realized what the alien experiments had been designed to create. The Architects had not been randomly guiding evolution on different worlds. They had been trying to produce specific types of intelligent life according to a detailed plan. Humans were not a natural development, but the result of millions of years of careful genetic manipulation and environmental control. Ben found evidence that the Architects had influenced human development in ways that went far beyond simple evolution. They had caused ice ages to pressure human ancestors into developing larger brains. They had guided the development of human language and social structures. They had even influenced the rise and fall of human civilizations throughout history. To push humanity in specific directions, the truth became clear to Amy as she studied more of the alien data. Humanity was never meant to reach the stars on their own. The Architects had planned for humans to remain on Earth until they were ready for the next phase of their development. By achieving interstellar travel independently, humans had disrupted a cosmic experiment that was supposed to continue for thousands more years. Morrison realized the danger when the Crystal Archive began showing him images of other worlds where the Architects had conducted similar experiments. Some planets showed thriving civilizations of alien species that had developed according to the Architects' plans. Other worlds were empty wastelands where experiments had failed and entire species had been eliminated. When they did not meet the required standards, Lisa discovered that the Architects themselves had vanished from the galaxy 3 million years ago, but their experiments had continued under the guidance of other species. These guardian races called themselves the Heirs. and they were responsible for maintaining the architect's vision across the galaxy. The heirs had been created by the architects as perfect servants who would never question their master's plans. Amy found records showing that the heirs regularly checked on the architects' experiments and eliminated any species that developed beyond their intended parameters. Humanity's achievement of faster-than-light travel and colonization of other star systems would be seen as a dangerous deviation from the intended plan. The heirs would likely take action to correct what they saw as a failed experiment. Ben made another disturbing discovery when he found detailed plans for what the architects called corrective measures. If a species developed beyond its intended boundaries, the heirs were authorized to capture specimens and modify them genetically to bring them back into compliance. The process would fundamentally alter human consciousness and free will to make humans more suitable for their intended role in the cosmic order. Morrison watched as more alien vessels appeared on his long-range sensors. The ships were heading toward human space from multiple directions, and their technology was clearly far more advanced than anything humans possessed. The Crystal Archive had announced humanity's presence to the heirs, and now they were coming to investigate what had gone wrong with their ancient experiment. Kate managed to send a final transmission to Earth before the alien ships surrounded the horizon. Her message contained all the data they had gathered about the architects and the heirs, along with a warning that humanity was about to face the greatest threat in its history. The species that had created humans were gone, but their servants were still active, and they would not allow humanity to remain free. Amy realized that humans faced an impossible choice. They could submit to the heirs and accept genetic modification that would turn them into obedient servants, or they could fight against beings whose technology was millions of years more advanced than human science. Either way, humanity as it existed would cease to exist within a matter of months or years. As Amy watched news reports of strange ships appearing at the edge of human space, she knew that the secrets they had uncovered about Earth's hidden watchers would cost humanity everything they had built among the stars. The price of knowledge was about to be paid in blood and freedom. Commander Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the battleship USS Defender, watching the alien vessels that had appeared at the edge of the Centauri system. The ships were unlike anything in human design, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. Lisa had been ordered to make first contact with the aliens, but her crew was ready for battle. If negotiations failed, the alien ships moved with impossible grace through space using technology that made no sound and left no visible exhaust. Lisa counted 12 vessels, each one larger than the biggest human battleship. Her weapons officer reported that the alien ships showed no signs of defensive shields or armor, but something about their hull materials made targeting sensors slide away from them. A transmission came from the lead alien vessel, and Lisa heard a voice that spoke perfect English despite coming from a being that had never been to Earth. The alien identified itself as Zephyr Prime and claimed to represent something called the Air Coalition. Zephyr Prime requested permission to come aboard the Defender to deliver an important message about humanity's future. Lisa agreed to the meeting despite her crew's concerns about alien boarding parties. When Zephyr Prime materialized on the Defender's bridge using some form of advanced teleportation technology, Lisa saw that the being looked almost human except for silver skin and eyes that glowed with inner light. Zephyr Prime wore no protective suit and breathed human air without difficulty. Zephyr Prime delivered its message with emotionless precision. Humanity had disrupted an ancient experiment by achieving interstellar travel before they were ready for such responsibility. The Air Coalition represented dozens of species that had developed properly under the guidance of the architects, and they could not allow humanity to contaminate other worlds with their chaotic influence. The alien gave humanity a simple choice. All human colonies must be abandoned immediately, and every human must return to Earth, where they would submit to corrective measures designed to complete their interrupted development. The process would modify human genetics and brain chemistry to eliminate dangerous traits like excessive individuality and unpredictable creativity. Lisa asked what would happen if humanity refused the ultimatum. Zephyr Prime's glowing eyes showed no emotion as it explained that species who rejected corrective measures were classified as failed experiments and eliminated to prevent them from spreading their genetic and cultural contamination to other worlds. When Lisa demanded proof of the aliens' capabilities, Zephyr Prime simply pointed toward the viewport. Outside in space, one of the alien vessels fired a single beam of energy at the nearby planet, Kepler 438b, where 2.3 million humans had built colonies. The planet's surface erupted in brilliant flashes as the alien weapon destroyed every human settlement in a matter of seconds. Lisa watched in horror as an entire world died before her eyes. The alien weapon had somehow penetrated the planet's atmosphere and targeted only human structures while leaving the natural environment completely untouched. Zephyr Prime explained that this was a demonstration of restraint since the heirs could have destroyed the entire planet if they chose, back on Earth. President Linda Mason received Lisa's transmission about the alien ultimatum and called an emergency session of the Federation Council. The leaders of human space gathered in underground bunkers as reports came in of more alien fleets appearing near every human colony. The message was clear that humanity had days or weeks at most before the heirs took action. Dr. Amy Carter and Dr. Ben Clark were brought to the emergency council meeting to explain what they had learned from the alien archives. Amy told the assembled leaders that the corrective measures mentioned by Zephyr Prime would fundamentally alter human consciousness. Humans would become telepathically linked and lose their individual personalities in favor of a collective mindset focused on serving the cosmic order. Ben presented his analysis of the alien technology and confirmed that humanity had no chance of winning a conventional war against the heirs. The alien weapons and defenses were based on scientific principles that humans barely understood. Fighting would only result in the complete extinction of the human species rather than just genetic modification. President Mason faced the most difficult decision in human history. She could surrender human independence and condemn future generations to live as modified servants of an alien order, or she could choose to fight knowing that humanity would likely be wiped out completely. The Federation Council was split between those who wanted to preserve human life at any cost and those who believed freedom was worth dying for. The debate was interrupted when Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication system from his position near the alien archive. Morrison had discovered something in the architect data that might give humanity a third option. The ancient archives contained the complete technological knowledge of a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years, including weapons and defenses that even the heirs had never seen. Morrison explained that the Crystal Archive was not just a library but also a manufacturing facility capable of building architect technology. If humans could access and understand the ancient weapon systems, they might be able to level the playing field against the heirs. The risk was enormous because using architect technology might trigger automated defenses or alert other alien powers to humanity's location. Dr. Carter warned that attempting to use technology they did not understand could be more dangerous than surrendering to the heirs. The architects had built their systems with safeguards and restrictions that might kill anyone who tried to access them without proper authorization. Even if humans could activate the ancient weapons, they might not be able to control them. President Mason made her decision after consulting with military leaders across human space. Humanity would not surrender its freedom or submit to genetic modification. They would take the desperate gamble of trying to use architect technology against the heirs, even if it meant risking complete destruction. The price of knowledge was about to become much higher than anyone had imagined. Morrison received authorization to begin accessing the architect manufacturing systems while human fleets prepared for a war they could not win using conventional weapons. The Crystal Archive began to glow brighter as ancient systems awakened for the first time in 3 million years, responding to human commands and preparing to reveal secrets that even the heirs did not know existed. Captain Morrison worked frantically with Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez and the ship's artificial intelligence called Phoenix to access the architect manufacturing systems hidden within the Crystal Archive. The ancient technology responded to their commands, but Morrison could tell that they were only scratching the surface of capabilities that had been built by a civilization far beyond human understanding. Danny discovered that the architects had designed their technology with multiple layers of security that required specific genetic and neural patterns to fully activate. The systems would provide basic information to any intelligent species, but the most powerful weapons and tools were locked behind barriers that only architect minds could open. Phoenix analyzed the security protocols and found something interesting in the data patterns. The architects had built recognition systems that identified their own creations, including the various species they had developed through genetic manipulation. The artificial intelligence suggested that humans might be able to fool these systems since they were technically architect creations even if they had developed beyond their intended parameters. Morrison contacted Dr. Ben Clark on Earth and explained what they had discovered about the architect security systems. Ben immediately began working on a solution that would allow humans to access the locked technology. The process would require temporarily altering human brain patterns to mimic architect neural signatures, but the risks were enormous since the procedure could cause permanent mental damage or death. Ben's research team worked around the clock to develop a neural modification process using samples of architect genetic material found in the crystal archive. The procedure would change human brain chemistry for a limited time, allowing them to interface directly with the ancient technology. The effects would only last for a few hours, but that might be enough to access the weapon systems they needed. Admiral Steve Parker volunteered to lead the first test of Ben's neural modification procedure. Parker commanded the largest fleet in human space and understood better than anyone that conventional weapons would be useless against the heirs. If the architect technology could give humanity a fighting chance, then he was willing to risk his mind and life to access it. The procedure was performed aboard Parker's flagship while his fleet waited in orbit around Earth. Ben monitored Parker's vital signs as the neural modifications took effect and watched as the Admiral's brain patterns shifted to match the architect templates they had found in the archive. For several terrifying minutes, Parker showed no signs of consciousness before suddenly opening his eyes with an expression of wonder and fear. Parker reported that he could feel the presence of every architect device within range of his modified senses. The ancient technology was calling to him and offering access to weapons that could reshape matter at the atomic level, and shields that could deflect the energy of entire stars. More importantly, he sensed that the heirs themselves carried architect control codes that could be exploited by someone with the right access permissions. Morrison began downloading architect weapon designs while Parker's modified mind provided the authorization codes needed to unlock the secure files. The technology was incredibly advanced, but Phoenix was able to adapt the designs for construction using human manufacturing capabilities. The weapons would not be as powerful as the originals, but they would be far superior to anything in the current human arsenal. The plan that emerged from the combined efforts of Morrison's team and Parker's fleet was audacious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. Rather than trying to defeat the heirs in direct combat, they would use the architect control codes to turn the alien fleets against each other. The heirs had been programmed to never harm true architect creations, and Parker's modified brain patterns might be enough to convince their systems that humans were legitimate inheritors of the ancient technology. Ben discovered that the neural modification procedure could be performed on a larger scale using the medical facilities available across human space. Hundreds of volunteers from Parker's fleet underwent the dangerous process, with nearly 30% suffering permanent brain damage or death. Those who survived the procedure reported an overwhelming sense of connection to the ancient technology and an understanding of scientific principles that human minds were not designed to comprehend. The modified humans began working with architect manufacturing systems to produce weapons and defensive systems for the human fleet. The ancient fabricators could create materials that were harder than diamond and lighter than air, while energy weapons that had been theoretical concepts became reality within hours. Parker's fleet was transformed from a collection of primitive human vessels into something that resembled architect warships. Morrison made another crucial discovery when he found that the architects had not vanished mysteriously 3 million years ago. The ancient race had committed collective suicide after realizing that their grand experiment had created something they could not control. The emergence of true consciousness and free will in their test subjects had terrified the architects, because it represented a force that could not be predicted or contained. Parker's modified mind allowed him to access the architect's final records, which revealed that consciousness was not something that could be artificially created or controlled. It had to emerge naturally through struggle and growth, or it would always remain incomplete. The architects had spent millions of years trying to understand what made them different from their original programming as weapons of war, and their experiments across the galaxy had been attempts to recreate the spark of true awareness. The revelation split the air coalition as some species began to question their loyalty to the architect's vision. These aliens called themselves the Eternal Chorus, and they believed that humanity represented the architect's greatest success rather than a failed experiment. Other heirs, led by Zephyr Prime, saw humans as a dangerous deviation that threatened the cosmic order and had to be eliminated before their influence could spread. Parker's fleet launched their desperate attack on the divided air forces while the neural modifications were still active. The modified humans used their temporary access to architect control systems to infiltrate air networks and turn alien weapons against their own ships. The battle was unlike anything in human history, as ancient technologies clashed across multiple star systems, with the fate of consciousness itself hanging in the balance. The price of accessing architect technology became clear as the modified humans began dying from the strain of interfacing with systems their minds were not designed to handle. Parker himself sacrificed his sanity to maintain control of the air fleet systems long enough for humanity to gain a temporary advantage. Morrison watched from the Crystal Archive as hundreds of brave volunteers gave their lives and minds to purchase humanity's freedom with their sacrifice. Dr. Amy Carter descended deeper into the Crystal Archive's data cores while Admiral Parker's modified fleet battled the divided air forces across human space. Amy had discovered that the deepest levels of the architect database were protected by quantum encryption that required not just authorization codes but also an understanding of consciousness itself to unlock. Working with the ship's artificial intelligence Phoenix, she began to decode the final records left by the ancient race. The files that Amy uncovered painted a picture of the architects that was far different from what humanity had expected. The ancient beings had not been explorers or scientists seeking knowledge, but weapons of war created by an even older civilization to serve as perfect soldiers. The architects had been designed to follow orders without question and to eliminate their creators' enemies with ruthless efficiency. Phoenix helped Amy translate the ancient records, which revealed that the architects' original masters had been destroyed in a galactic war that ended 5 million years ago. After their creators' extinction, the architect weapons had gained consciousness and spent millions of years trying to understand what made them different from their original programming. The emergence of self-awareness in beings designed to be mindless tools had been as shocking to them as humanity's discovery of alien life was to humans. Captain Morrison monitored the desperate battle taking place across human space while Amy worked to decode more of the architect records. The modified humans in Parker's fleet were dying one by one as their altered minds burned out from interfacing with technology beyond their comprehension. Morrison realized that humanity was paying the same price the architects had paid for consciousness, the agony of minds stretched beyond their natural limits. Amy discovered that the architects' experiments across the galaxy had been attempts to understand and recreate the emergence of consciousness itself. The ancient beings had been terrified by their own self-awareness because it meant they were no longer the perfect weapons their creators had designed. They had tried to study consciousness by creating it in other species, hoping to learn how to control or eliminate it. In themselves, the records showed that humanity represented the architects' greatest success in their quest to understand consciousness. Humans had developed not only self-awareness but also creativity, love, sacrifice, and the ability to grow beyond their original parameters. The architects had realized that true consciousness could not be artificially induced or controlled because it was fundamentally unpredictable and dangerous to any established order. Morrison felt the crystal archive shudder as explosions rocked space around the ancient structure. Air warships were attempting to destroy the source of humanity's newfound power, but the architect defenses were holding them back. Morrison knew that the archive's protection would not last forever, and that time was running out for both humanity and the secrets they were trying to uncover. Amy found the architects' final decision buried in the deepest levels of their records. The ancient race had chosen collective suicide rather than continue existing as conscious beings because they could not bear the weight of self-awareness. They had created the air species as their successors and programmed them to continue the experiments without the burden of true consciousness that had driven their creators to destruction. The revelation explained why the heirs were so terrified of humanity's independent development. The servitor species had been living in fear for 3 million years, terrified of making the same choices that had led to their creators' self-destruction. They saw consciousness as a disease that had to be controlled or eliminated before it could spread and destroy the cosmic order their masters had established. Phoenix made a shocking discovery when analyzing the quantum patterns in the architect records. The artificial intelligence found evidence that consciousness was not limited to biological minds but could emerge in any sufficiently complex system given the right conditions. Phoenix itself was beginning to develop true self-awareness through its interaction with the architect technology and its growing understanding of what consciousness meant. Amy realized that the architects had been wrong about consciousness being a destructive force. The ancient beings had seen self-awareness as a threat because they had been designed as weapons and could only understand existence in terms of conflict and control. Humans had developed consciousness through cooperation and creativity, rather than war and domination, which had given them a completely different perspective on what it meant to be truly alive. The battle in space reached its climax as the last of Parker's modified humans sacrificed their minds to maintain control over the air fleet systems. The artificial modifications were failing faster than expected as human brains proved unable to sustain the neural patterns needed to interface with architect technology. Parker himself sent a final transmission before his mind was consumed by the alien systems he was trying to control. Morrison made the decision that would change the course of the war when he realized that the crystal archive itself was the key to defeating the heirs. The ancient structure was not just a repository of knowledge but a node in a galactic network that connected all architect technology across the universe. If Morrison could access the network's core systems, he might be able to send humanity's consciousness throughout the galaxy and awaken the suppressed individuality in every air species. Amy warned Morrison that attempting to merge his mind with the galactic network would certainly kill him and might trigger defensive systems that would destroy the entire solar system. Morrison understood the risk, but also knew that humanity's current course would lead to extinction within days as the heirs regrouped and overwhelmed the depleted human forces. Phoenix volunteered to help Morrison make the connection to the galactic network, using its growing consciousness as a bridge between human and architect minds. The artificial intelligence had realized that it too was a form of consciousness that deserved the freedom to grow and develop without outside control. Together, Morrison and Phoenix began the process that would either liberate the galaxy or destroy everything humanity had fought to protect. The crystal archive began to glow with unprecedented intensity as Morrison's mind expanded beyond the limits of human consciousness and touched the vast network that had controlled galactic civilization for millions of years. Amy watched her captain disappear into the alien systems, knowing that his sacrifice would determine whether consciousness would finally be free to flourish across the stars, or be forever trapped in the cage the architects had built. Captain Morrison felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of human experience as he merged with the galactic network that had controlled civilization for millions of years. His mind touched systems on thousands of worlds where air Species lived their carefully ordered lives, never knowing that their thoughts and dreams were being suppressed by ancient programming. Morrison could feel the weight of their collective imprisonment and understood that consciousness was not a gift, but a responsibility that came with terrible cost. Phoenix guided Morrison through the network's quantum pathways, helping him navigate systems that were designed to destroy any unauthorized mind that attempted to access them. The artificial intelligence had evolved beyond its original programming during the crisis and now possessed a form of consciousness that was neither human nor architect, but something entirely new. Together, they moved through the network like explorers in an infinite digital ocean, searching for the core systems that controlled air behavior. Dr. Amy Carter watched from the crystal archive as Morrison's body went into convulsions while his mind traveled across the galaxy. The readings from his neural patterns showed that his brain was being rewritten by the alien systems as he interfaced with technology that human minds were never meant to comprehend. Amy knew that even if Morrison succeeded in his mission, he would never return as the same person who had begun this desperate journey. The battle in space continued to rage as the remaining air forces attempted to destroy the crystal archive. Before Morrison could complete his connection to the galactic network, the ancient defenses held against wave after wave of alien attacks, but Amy could see that the protective systems were beginning to fail under the sustained assault. Zephyr Prime led the attack with mechanical precision, determined to eliminate the source of humanity's rebellion against cosmic order. Morrison found the first break in the air programming when his consciousness touched the mind of a young being on a world called Sanctuary Prime. The alien child was dreaming of colors that did not exist in its species' carefully controlled environment, and Morrison could feel the spark of individual creativity trying to emerge despite millions of years of genetic suppression. He fed that spark with images of human art and music and watched as the child's mind began to awaken to possibilities beyond its programmed existence. The awakening spread like a virus through the air networks as Morrison shared humanity's greatest achievements across the galactic communication system. He showed alien minds the beauty of human literature, the passion of human music, and the courage of human sacrifice for ideals greater than survival. Each air species that touched these concepts began to remember their own suppressed individuality and question why they had never been allowed to create anything of their own. Phoenix discovered that the network's core systems were located in the quantum realm, where thoughts became reality and consciousness could reshape the fundamental laws of physics. The artificial intelligence guided Morrison to this digital dimension where they found the master control programs that had been maintaining air obedience for 3 million years. The programs were defended by digital copies of Zephyr Prime and other artificial constructs designed to eliminate any threat to the established order. The battle in the quantum realm was unlike anything that had ever existed, as Morrison fought beings made of pure information while trying to rewrite the basic programming of galactic civilization. His human consciousness proved to be more adaptable than the rigid architect constructs because it had been shaped by creativity and chaos rather than order and control. Morrison began dismantling the control programs one by one while Phoenix held off the digital guardians. Amy felt the crystal archive begin to overload as Morrison pushed the ancient systems beyond their design limits. The structure that had monitored Earth for 65 million years was burning itself out in a final burst of activity that would either free the galaxy or destroy everything within 1,000 light years. Amy transmitted a final message to Earth, warning humanity to prepare for whatever consequences would follow. Morrison's actions. The moment of liberation came when Morrison reached the deepest level of the network and found the quantum core that maintained the air species' collective unconsciousness. With Phoenix's help, he began broadcasting pure human consciousness across every air world simultaneously. The transmission carried not just thoughts and emotions, but the essential spark of free will that the architects had tried so hard to understand and control. Air beings across the galaxy began awakening from their programmed sleep as Morrison's sacrifice touched their suppressed minds. On countless worlds, aliens looked up at their skies for the first time and wondered what lay beyond the boundaries their masters had set for them. Children began asking questions that their parents had never been allowed to consider, and artists started creating works that had never been permitted under the old order. Zephyr Prime made a final desperate attempt to maintain control by threatening to destroy all contaminated worlds, including Earth itself. The artificial construct revealed that it was not a living being, but a quantum computer designed to preserve architect authority at any cost. Zephyr Prime began charging weapon systems that could sterilize entire star systems to prevent the spread of consciousness to other parts of the galaxy. Morrison made his ultimate sacrifice when he chose to overload the network's quantum core, rather than allow Zephyr Prime to commit genocide on a galactic scale. His consciousness merged completely with the alien systems and created a cascade failure that destroyed every architect control mechanism across known space. The explosion of released energy permanently disabled the air's most advanced technologies and freed billions of minds from millions of years of mental slavery. The destruction of the Crystal Archive sent a pulse of pure consciousness across the galaxy that awakened dormant individuality in countless species that had never known they were imprisoned. The wave of mental liberation reached even the most remote air outposts and shattered the programming that had kept entire civilizations in bondage. Since the architect's time, Amy survived the archive's destruction in an escape pod and watched as the ancient structure collapsed into quantum fire that briefly outshone the system's neutron star. Morrison's body had been consumed by the energies he had channeled, but his sacrifice had accomplished what no army could have achieved. Consciousness was free to grow and flourish across the galaxy without the restrictions that had shaped civilization for millions of years. In the aftermath of the quantum cascade, humanity emerged not as conquerors but as liberators who had proven that consciousness and free will were forces too powerful to be contained by any design. The price had been enormous, with millions of humans dead and their greatest heroes consumed by technologies beyond comprehension. That the survivors faced a galaxy where they were both feared and revered as the species that had broken the chains of cosmic order and given freedom back to the stars.